So hi everyone, it's me again, Janeline A. Incargus from BE Ed second year. So today we will going to talk about Module 4, which is Heredity, Inheritance and Variation, which contains 4 lessons. Lesson 1, Living Things Reproduce. Lesson 2, Life Cycles of Human, Animals and Plants. Lesson 3, Reproduction among flowering plants, and Lesson 4, Reproduction in non-flowering plant. So at the end of this lesson, the pupils will be able to differentiate heredity, inheritance, and variation, identify the characteristic of living and non-living things, find out how living things reproduce their own kind, and compare sexual and asexual reproduction of living things. So heredity, inheritance, and variation. Heredity explains why offspring resemble but are not identical to their parents and is a unifying biological principle. Heredity refers to specific mechanism by which characteristics or traits are passed from one generation to the next via genes. Genes encode the information for making specific proteins which are responsible for the specific traits of an individual. Each gene can leave several variants, called alleles, which code for different variants of the traits in question. Genes reside in a cell's chromosomes, each of which contains many genes. Every cell of any individual organisms contains the identical set of chromosomes. When organisms reproduce, genetic information is transferred to their offspring, and species that reproduce sexually, each cell contains 2 variants of each chromosome, one inherited from each parent. Thus, sexual reproduction gives rise to the new combination of chromosome pairs with variation between parents and offspring. Very rarely, mutations also cause variation, which may be harmful, neutral, or occasionally advantageous for an individual. Environmental as well as genetic variation and the relative dominance of each of the genes in a pair play an important role in how traits develop within an individual. Complex relationships between genes and interaction of genes with the environment determine how an organism will develop and function. So now we were going to talk all about lesson 2, which is living things reproduce. We can find many things around us, from mountains and oceans to plants and animals. The earth in which we live is made up of several things, can be categorized into 2 different types, living and non-living things. Living things are born, grow, reproduce, grow old, and die. People, animals, and plants are all living things. Living things need air, water, food, and shelter to survive. Living things have life, though some might not show its evident signs. For instance, a tree would probably not react the same way a human would. It would not react when we hit it, and it might not be able to walk around. Though the sign of life displayed by them are not very observable, it does not make them non-living. Let us have a detailed look at the important characteristics of living things. Characteristics of living things. All living things move. Animals run, birds fly, fishes swim, and even plants show movements. If you touch the leaves of the mimosa or touch-me-not plant, the leaves immediately closes. Living things exhibit locomotory motion. They move. Plants move in order to catch sunlight for photosynthesis. Animals move from one place to another in search of food and shelter. They also move to run away from their enemies. The second characteristic is living things grow. A human body grows into a young child and then to an adult. A seed grows into a new plant and then it may grow to become a tree. All animals and plants undergo changes as they grow during their lifetime. Living things grow. They undergo a process called aging or age. As they get close to the end of their lifespan, their ability to carry out life function reduces. Eventually, they die to end the process of life. Next is living things need food. Human beings, animals, and plants need food to grow, move, and keep their body fit and healthy. All living things need food to stay alive, grow, and get energy. Nutrition is a process by which living things get or make food. All animals get food by eating other living things. Next characteristic is living things breathe. Human beings and many animals breathe through their nose. Fishes breathe through their gills. Plants breathe through a small opening on their leaves called stomata. All living things breathe in air. Plants need air rich in carbon dioxide to prepare its own food for its growth. The covered plants died as there was no air rich in carbon dioxide. Living things take in fresh air and gives out unwanted air after it used by the body is called as breathing. Next is living things feel changes around them. Human beings and animals feel changes around them with the help of their sense organs. These sense organs are eyes, nose, ears, tongue, and skin. Some plants also feel changes such as mimosa plant as mentioned above. Organisms change their behavior in response to the changes in the surrounding environment. For example, an organism may move in response to its environment. The last characteristic is living things reproduce and have babies. All living things either give birth to their young ones or lay eggs. Human beings, cows, goats, lions, and elephants give birth to babies. Birds, crocodiles, snakes, tortoises, and lizards lay eggs. Babies hatch from these eggs. Plants reproduce from seeds. Seeds then grow into a plant. Almost all living things can make copies of themselves or have babies. This is called reproduction. Animals reproduce in different ways. While some animals gave birth to live young, other animals lay eggs that contain young. This is non-living things are things that are not alive. They do not move, they do not grow, they do not need food. Example of non-living things are chair, television, car, utensils, pencils, and etc. Non-living things are not alive. They do not possess life, they do not have cells, and do not grow or show locomotion or movement. In other words, non-living things are man-made. So now let's proceed to how living things reproduce. So what is reproduction? Reproduction is the production of offspring. It enables and ensures the continuity of species generation after generation. It is the main feature of the life on Earth. Reproduction can be either sexual, involving a single parent organism, or asexual, requiring two parents. Two types of reproduction: the asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. In sexual, two different parents contribute genetic information. It involves the combination of male and female sex cells. However, in asexual reproduction, a single parent's organism producing by itself. How do living things reproduce asexually? Living things reproduce asexually in four major types such as binary fission, budding, fragmentation, and parthenogenesis. In binary fission, single parent cell doubles its DNA then divides into two cells. It usually occurs in bacteria. Number 2 is budding. Small growth on surface of parent breaks off, resulting in the formation of two individuals. Budding occurs in yeast and some animals like the hydra below. The third is fragmentation. Organisms break into two or more fragments that develop into a new individual. Fragmentation occurs in many plants as well as some animals like coral, sponges, and starfish. The last is parthenogenesis. An embryo develops from an unfertilized cell. It occurs in invertebrates as well as in some fish, amphibians, and reptiles. How do living things reproduce sexually? Sexual reproduction occurs when each parent contributes a gamete, a sexual cell that has half of the normal DNA of a regular body cell. In males, the gametes are sperms, and in females, the gametes are eggs. When these two gametes combine during fertilization, the result is a zygote, which then continues to develop into an embryo. So let's move on to the last part of our discussion. Comparing sexual versus asexual reproduction. In asexual reproduction, it requires two parents. Sperms fertilizes egg, used by animals, flowering plants, some fungi. Offspring are different from parents, provide genetic variation but time-consuming. However, in asexual reproduction, it requires one parent. Single organism makes an exact copy of itself. Bacteria, some plants and fungi, few animals or sponges belong to asexual reproduction. Offspring are identical to parent and fast and easy but not genetic variation. So that would be all in Module 4, Heredity, Inheritance and Variation, and in Lesson 1, Living Things Reproduce. So thank you so much everyone for watching, and I hope you learned something.